Hey guys, tonight we are sliding ever so gently into the wobbly chaise lounge of history's weirdest weight loss obsessions. That's right, the truth behind Ozempic and why humans keep grabbing for miracle quick fixes, like a toddler at a cake buffet. If you've ever looked at a celebrity magazine, scrolled past a before and after photo, or whispered, maybe just one more French fry, then congratulations, you're in the target audience. And before you get too cozy, I need you to do me a solid, like the miracle pill we're all waiting for. Go ahead and like this video and subscribe. But only if you actually enjoy having your midnight existential crises narrated to you by a stranger on the internet. Want to confess your weirdest snack regret? In the comments, please, make me feel better about that time I ate icing straight from the tub. Now dim those lights, turn on your fan for that vintage hummed white noise effect, get horizontal, and let's ponder the age-old question. Why are humans eternally falling for the latest, greatest, clinically questionable magic medicine? Do you ever wonder if someday scientists will invent a weight loss drug that actually turns you into a mermaid? Did anyone ever lose weight just from chasing the local snake oil salesman out of town? Was your great-great-grandma secretly mainlining celery juice in the 1920s? Could people in the Jazz Age lose weight just by Charlestoning it off? Or did they also dream while eating steak and onions of an easier way? And now, congratulations. You've just woken up in a history lecture, but make it absurd. We're tracing the lineage of human gullibility from Victorian corset torture devices to the Ozempic craze. Your metabolism is irrelevant. Your curiosity is insatiable. Buckle up, because this is going to be heavier than your great-uncle's collection of diet cookbooks. It's 400 BC, and you're a philosopher in ancient Greece. Not only do you have to listen to Socrates drone on at dinner, but you're also expected to control your hunger using foul-tasting concoctions and mysterious herbs. No pressure. Was oregano the original metabolism booster, or was everyone just too scared of the side effects to eat bread? Let's set the scene. Long before protein bars and zero-calorie sodas, ancient cultures faced the same dilemma we do today. How to enjoy a meal without letting it show up on your toga. The Greeks, in particular, merged their love of thinking with a healthy dose of dietary paranoia. They looked to nature, and sometimes the gods, for solutions. That oregano on your pizza. In Athens, it wasn't just for flavor. It was sometimes prescribed as a mild appetite suppressant. Toss in some bitter gourd, a few spoonfuls of vinegar, and you've got the makings of a pre-burrito cleanse that Hippocrates himself might have recommended. Dieting was almost as much a philosophical pursuit as a physical one. The Stoics, for example, believed in mastering bodily urges, hunger included, by sheer force of will. Ancient texts describe elaborate fasts and rituals, often advertised as spiritual enlightenment, but probably also helpful for squeezing into your ceremonial robes. Sometimes, hunger was a test of character. Other times, it was a side effect of whatever herbal tea you just choked down. Now, if you were fortunate enough to live closer to the Nile, Egyptian appetite control came with a slightly different prescription. The Ebers Papyrus, an ancient Egyptian medical scroll, mentions appetite suppressants, fashioned from everything from coriander to opium lettuce. These were mixed with wine or pounded into honey cakes, creating something akin to the world's first herbal supplement. Did it taste good? Absolutely not. But if you're trying to keep up with Pharaoh's rigorous court ceremonies, you didn't have much choice. Appetite was often framed as unruly, something to be tamed, whether through caloric sleight of hand or the bitterest brew you could stomach. Travel east, and China's early approaches to appetite were a blend of philosophy and spice. Ancient practitioners of traditional Chinese medicine championed bitter herbs like lotus seeds and ginseng not just to stave off hunger, but also to balance qi, life energy. Hunger, in this worldview, was more than a bodily urge. It was evidence that your internal energies needed harmonizing. In practice, this meant sipping pungent teas and gnawing on roots while your more gluttonous neighbors reached for extra servings of rice. One can't overlook the Romans. After all, if anyone loved feasting, it was the citizens of Rome. Yet beneath the surface-level decadence, Romans also grappled with restraint. Pliny the Elder, a Roman author and natural philosopher, wrote about appetite suppressants like wormwood and rue, both of which sound more like medieval curses than culinary ingredients. Devout Romans bodied these strange remedies in pursuit of a physique worthy of a marble statue. If willpower waned, there was always the threat, real or imagined, of bodily humours spiralling out of balance. You didn't want to upset the humours. That's when the leeches came out. Despite the dubious flavours and often questionable science, what's clear is that ancient appetite suppressors weren't just about vanity. They reflected each culture's relationship to food, health, and self-control. Suppressing hunger was wrapped up in religion, medicine, and even a dash of social pressure. Who wanted to be known as the philosopher who asked for seconds at Plato's banquet? So while you might scoff at the idea of a diet based on raw onions and wild herbs, if you've ever sipped black coffee to betray your cravings or reached for celery instead of a cookie, you're part of an ancient tradition. Appetite suppressors have always been less about the potion or powder and more about the eternal hope that the next remedy, however bitter, might finally quiet that stubborn growling in your stomach. In ancient times, as now, the pursuit of appetite control was never just about what you ate. It was, and always will be, about who you thought you should be. You're at a decadent Roman feast. Pass the grapes. Ignore the bowl of feathers for induced vomiting. Senators swap secrets about saffron teas and lead-based detox drinks. You wonder if anyone has noticed you're wearing the same tunic as last week, only one belt notch tighter. Surrounded by golden platters piled high with dormice stuffed with nuts and honey, you can't help but marvel at the sheer excess of the Roman diet. It was the height of fashion to be seen indulging, not just in food, but in the radical rituals that promised eternal youth and glowing skin, or at least fewer boils. The well-to-do patrician might start the morning with a healthy dose of garum, the infamous fermented fish sauce, slathered over yesterday's bread. For those in the know, this wasn't just a condiment. It was the magic elixir of the era, rumoured to cure everything from indigestion to heartbreak. And then there were the diets. Oh, the diets. Fad dieting wasn't invented by your cousin in the 21st century. It was alive and well in ancient Rome. Enthusiasts would debate the virtue of abstaining from wine versus downing it by the amphora, all in the name of balance. Saffron appeared in everything: teas, poultices, and even beauty masks. Meanwhile, the not-so-ancient wisdom of the day championed the purifying powers of lead. Why not sweeten your wine with a dash of lead acetate? After all, what harm could it possibly cause? Here's where the wild side effects come in. As you chase your olives with a suspiciously metallic-tasting cup of mulsum, a slave whispers about Tiberius, the emperor known for his love of cucumbers. So much so, his gardeners invented movable greenhouses to grow them year-round. People said cucumbers could ward off poison, but the emperor's appetite for novelty nearly killed him off anyway. Who knew excessive cucumber consumption could, shall we say, quicken the digestive process a little too much? Across the reclining couches, a matron extols the virtues of animal-based diet aids, plucking a few peacock feathers for her more image-obsessed guests. The process was simple. Eat until you couldn't move, sneak off to lighten the load, then return for the next course. This cyclical feasting and purging wasn't a dirty secret, but celebrated behavior at the most fashionable gatherings. If you thought the current detox juice craze was extreme, the Romans would laugh and vomit you right out of the triclinium. Weight wasn't just a matter of vanity, it was a status symbol. Skinny was in if you were a slave, but for the elite, curves signaled that you had access to luxury. Sculptors immortalized fleshy folds in marble, but the wealthy also feared the side effects of too much indulgence. Remedies abounded: vinegar-based tonics, cabbage cures, and nightly walks, often to the communal latrine. This was self-care, ancient Rome style, but there was a darker side to these wild diets. Lead, commonly found in pipes and sweeteners, began to take its toll on the Roman upper class. Chronic stomach ailments, sudden memory lapses, and a mysterious uptick in unexplained madness were often attributed to diet rather than poisoning. If your hair started falling out or your skin turned ashen, perhaps you had offended the gods, or perhaps it was just too many helpings of improved wine at last week's wedding. In the background, a physician, part doctor, part magician, offers advice. Try boiled owl eggs. Swear off beans for a week. Forget sleep. Real Romans power through the night with a healthful concoction of herbs, must, and the occasional frog's leg. And if the wild remedies fail, there's always superstition. Hang a wolf's tooth around your neck or bathe in the moonlight, just in case the real problem is a curse. Through it all, the Roman dinner party is a showcase of culinary creativity, bizarre rituals, and the relentless human quest for health, however misguided. The next time your modern diet feels questionable, remember, the Romans walked so we could run, just preferably not after a meal of stuffed dormice. Their wild diets might seem ridiculous now, but the quest for the perfect body, and the lengths we'll go to achieve it, is perhaps the most timeless tradition of all. Congratulations, it's the Dark Ages, and your local apothecary swears by leeches for weight loss. If that fails, you can always try early detox through sweats, starvation, or chewing on mysterious grey paste. Let's just not ask what the main ingredient is. Medieval medicine was, to put it kindly, an adventure into the unknown. Imagine you're a noble, or just unlucky enough to have access to a physician. You complain of feeling a bit sluggish, the universal precursor to maybe lay off the mutton pies. Almost immediately, you'd be offered the hottest weight loss trend of the 12th century, bloodletting. Out came the leeches, plopped gently, or not so gently, onto your skin, expected to draw out your excesses of blood, of fat, possibly even of poor life choices. If you're lucky, you walk away a pint lighter, a little paler, and definitely hungrier. If not, well, at least the leeches are having a buffet. But leeches were just the beginning. Medieval Europe operated under the humoral theory. The idea that our bodies are filled with 4 energies, or humours: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. If you were overweight, physicians decided your humours were unbalanced, probably too much phlegm, and set to work with vigour and zero evidence. Enter the laxatives, a potpourri of crushed herbs, minerals, and whatever passed as digestive aids. Recipes included everything from powdered rhubarb to the ashes of burnt snails. The goal was simple, if not productive: flush out the fat, never mind the sanity or gastrointestinal trauma left in the aftermath. Of course, why limit yourself to potions when you could add in purgatives or dietary regimens? Medieval detoxes included extreme fasting, sometimes for days, heightened by marathon prayer sessions. If you hoped for solid medical advice, you'd be met with suggestions like, run around until you perspire, sit in a sauna, or drink vinegar mixed with sage. And if you survived the fasting, sweating, and vomiting, congratulations. Your lunacy must have been cleansed too. But the real wildcards were the miracle slimming pastes and weight-losing powders. These were shrouded in secrecy, sometimes literally, as the main ingredient could be anything from lead shavings, yes, really, to clay, chalk, or powdered viper. Not only could these substances allegedly suppress your appetite, but they might also do the job so well that even your local gravedigger would wonder about the sudden uptick in his business. The term, "don't try this at home," has never been more relevant. Yet, for all its madness, medieval dieting did have one thing right: the communal aspect. Most of these remedies were performed with an audience, family, friends, and the occasional priest gathered round to see whether today you'd survive your encounter with the leeches, or if Grandma's secret recipe for weightless pudding would claim another victim. Fasting, for example, became a shared, sometimes competitive spectacle, equal parts piety and peer pressure. Even literature from the era poked fun at the absurdity. Satirical poems and woodcut illustrations depicted plump monks napping post-feast, only to awaken to a regimen of sweating, leeching, and unidentifiable pills administered by doctors wearing intimidating masks. Healthy living was a concept in its infancy. No kale smoothies in sight, just the wild hope that today's remedy wouldn't out-crazy yesterday's. Ultimately, the medieval approach to weight loss blended desperation, superstition, and a touch of accidental comedy. While we may chuckle at the thought of leeches and powdered rhubarb, the underlying desire to change one's body, even at great risk, remains all too familiar. The next time you eye a strange wellness trend, just remember, you could be chewing on snake powder in a drafty castle. And in case anyone's keeping score, leeches, probably still less terrifying than a 48-hour medieval fast. You're living in an age of art, enlightenment, and codpieces. But behind those majestic paintings, noblemen are swapping early beauty pills made out of questionable ingredients. If you faint at the ball, just call it fasting for enlightenment. The Renaissance is usually remembered for its explosion of creativity, scientific discovery, and of course, the Mona Lisa's famously mysterious smile. But imagine standing in the candlelit glow of a grand Venetian hall. Above the chatter about the latest Botticelli motif, or gossip about which Spanish prince insulted whom, there's a quieter conversation going on. A conversation about bodies. Noblemen and women alike could suddenly see themselves reflected, often alarmingly accurately, in mainstream art. What did it mean to measure up? As it turns out, Renaissance beauty wasn't entirely about lush curves and flowing hair, as those portraits would have you believe. Painted ideals didn't always match lived reality. Beneath brocade gowns and velvet doublets, real bodies were being pinched, squeezed, and even starved into fashionable shapes. Upper-class women worked hard to cultivate the era's preferred round features and porcelain skin, while the gentlemen, well, let's say tight-fitting hose didn't leave much to the imagination, or the appetite. Enter the era's pseudo-scientific beauty advice, straight from the pages of dubious health manuscripts and whispered through palace corridors. Herbal teas believed to purify the blood were the Red Bulls of the 16th century. But there's a catch. Some of these concoctions contained mercury, lead, or arsenic. Slimness was newly desirable for the elite, so people risked their health popping what we might now call diet pills, hoping to flush out sins through alchemical magic. A headache? That's just a symptom of refinement. Never mind the blurred vision. And what about the famous Renaissance banquets? Think of the loaded tables from a Bruegel painting. Whole roasted boars, towers of candied fruit, jugs of sweet wine. Yet, for many women, the reality was a two-pronged fork and an excuse to nibble. Fasting for enlightenment became all the rage, partly thanks to religious traditions, but with a generous dose of vanity thrown in. Spirits apparently thrived on hunger. The rest of us just got hangry. Society women discreetly skipped meals for a clean look, passing out at gatherings. Not an accident, more a badge of fasting honor. The pressure to look the part was so intense that it even inspired medical treatises. Italian and French physicians penned advice columns centuries before the internet. Their verdict: avoid heating foods like red meat and spices, and stick to light broths and cooling dairy. If you're feeling faint, that's the body achieving harmony. Don't ruin it with a decent meal. Even male courtiers practice dietary self-discipline, contouring their physiques for those form-fitting pantaloons, though some opted for strategically padded codpieces instead of skipping dessert. All this striving had consequences. With the growth of global trade, newly available ingredients, such as sugar and chocolate, became status symbols, and also fuel for extreme diets and risky health hacks. Letter exchanges from aristocrats mention moist and cooling draughts, taken before a dance to keep cheeks pale. Others consult apothecaries for powders to soften the flesh. Young noblewomen retire to convents, not only for spiritual devotion, but for the strict diets that promise them angelic perfection. Once we step away from the glossy canvas and the glowing myths, we see a different renaissance, a society preoccupied with sculpting ideal bodies at any cost. Diet trends and insecurity were as much a product of the era as paintings and poems. Underneath those vaulted ceilings and gilded mirrors, the Renaissance body was less about divine inspiration and more about dangerous aspiration. So next time you marvel at a portrait in a museum, know that someone behind that serene expression was probably desperate for a snack, and maybe, just maybe, regretting last night's detox potion. If you'd like tweaks for pacing, voice, or research depth, let me know. It's the 1850s. You can either breathe or have a 20-inch waist, but not both. The patent medicine man promises a miracle tonic, and you're unsure if it'll make you svelte or slightly translucent. Surely that's normal. Let's walk the gaslit avenues, skirts rustling and ribs aching. Waists must vanish, bones be damned. The gentler sex, so the magazines say, is delicate, better cinched, fainting tastefully at the opera, fluttering a lavender-scented handkerchief. The price? An arsenal of whalebone, laces, hooks, and, for the especially daring, the alluring promise of Dr. Williams' fat-reducing elixir. Contents a mystery, side effects even more so. Every morning, your first opponent, the corset. You grip the bedpost as your sister hauls the laces tighter. The goal? 18 inches. Any more, and you may as well join the circus. Newspapers feature remarkable women who've achieved such feats, breathlessly recounting the grueling process, with the enthusiasm reserved for polar expeditions or scientific wonders. Accomplished tight lacers become minor celebrities, their medical mishaps whispered about, but never quite making the front page. Fainting, fits, mere evidence of refinement, shortness of breath, the sign of a fashionable silhouette. Eating, strictly for the lower classes who haven't yet discovered the wonders of self-restraint and hydrochloric acid pills. Advertisers seduce and threaten in turn. Do you wish to keep your figure, or shall you become, as they so melodramatically warn, a shapeless matron before 30? Yet, beneath those layers of lace and stiff cloth lies a silent suffering. Medical journals issue mild protests, mentions of deformed livers and crushed ribs. But who's listening? Not the women currently ceasing their breathing to descend the stairs in style. What's a slipped rib compared to the delight of the newest Parisian gown drawn smoothly over a wasp waist? Besides, many doctors too are caught up in the mystique, prescribing tonics alongside warnings or suggesting gentler corseting without ever questioning the system itself. The patent medicines, your next hope, await in amber bottles at the local chemists. Their labels glitter with promises, marvelous reductions, stout no more, elegant waistlines restored with no effort. You hand over a week's allowance, receive a bottle that smells faintly of ether and violets, and swallow a dose. Perhaps your waist will shrink. Perhaps your liver will never recover. Possibly both. Secrecy becomes the currency of the determined. The pursuit for thinness is both public pageant and private ordeal. Diaries are filled with desperate calculations, penciled anxieties, the chronicling of waist sizes and inch loss, a Victorian precursor to calorie counting and fitness tracking. Dinner is an obstacle course, politely pushing potatoes around your plate, claiming a delicate digestion. The servants, observant and unamused, exchange glances over the extra food in the scullery. Behind every drawing room bravado, behind every precisely tied sash, hover worries unspoken, that to be fashionable is to court danger, to suffer quietly, to valorize pain as elegance. Victorians may not have had Instagram, but they perfected the art of illusion, posing for sepia photographs, flattered by layers of silk and shadow, even as the reality lurked one gasp away. In this world, to be seen is to be measured, literally. Fashion plates and gossip columns dictate the standards. How very reduced she's become, whispers an envious friend. I believe she takes the elixir. Compliments and cruel observations blend, inseparable as whalebone and stays. The great irony? As Queen Victoria herself grows plumper with each royal child, the nation's women contort themselves further, all chasing an ever narrower ideal. No matter how much pain is pressed beneath those silks, the story is spun. Slenderness equals virtue, plumpness veers toward moral failing. And so, the struggle continues, one breathless morning after another, all in pursuit of the impossible Victorian silhouette. Let me know if you'd like further adjustments, or if you want this expanded with specific references to historical sources or notable individuals. Welcome to the Wild West, where bottles of dubious liquid promise to erase your spare tire. Assuming you don't lose organ function first. Snake oil. Not just for cowboys, but for anyone with a dollar and body image anxiety. If you've ever found yourself clutching a fat-burning tea at 2 a.m., whispering promises to your bathroom mirror, congratulations. You're part of a tradition with roots as deep and tangled as the Mississippi. Today's appetite suppressant pills and detox smoothies are just the modern, fruit-infused offspring of the original snake oil salesman who tumbled through dusty towns in the late 1800s, hawking miracle elixirs from the backs of wagons. These peddlers quickly figured out that desperation is a powerful market force, and nothing generates desperation quite like the promise of effortless transformation, originating, somewhat ironically, from Chinese laborers who brought real snake oil to the American West, a product that actually did have anti-inflammatory properties. The snake oil Americans bought was its own peculiar blend: mineral oil, camphor, cayenne pepper, and a lot of creative storytelling. Cowboys suffering from aches would buy these bottles by the dozens. But once the word got out that you could sell hope in a bottle, It wasn't just physical pain the salesman targeted. It was anything that made people feel less than: baldness, varicose veins, torpid liver. Whatever that was. The door was wide open for the next big thing. Now let's not give our mustachioed forebears too much credit. Americans have always had a why not relationship with instant results, especially when it comes to health and beauty. From tapeworm diet pills to vibrating belts, the story of miracle cures reads like a fever dream fueled by equal parts hope and caffeine. One ad from 1905 assured buyers that their excess flesh would simply melt away with just a teaspoon of tonic a day. The only thing that seemed to shrink reliably was the size of people's wallets. The seduction of secret formula solutions relies on a potent synergy, a willing, sometimes desperate public, and an infinitely renewable well of human insecurity. The desire to cut corners, bypass science, and leapfrog unpleasant effort is virtually hardwired into the American psyche. And while it's easy to laugh at sepia-tinted ads for obesity soap, washes away fat and years of sorrow, the craving for a miracle hasn't gone anywhere. We just get our snake oil in flashier packaging. Fast forward to today, and the sales pitch is the same. Only now it's fueled by glossy Instagram posts, micro-celebrities, and hashtags like Fitspo. Instead of frontier tents, the new peddlers show up in your feed, promising flat stomachs in weeks, tight skin in days, and chakra alignment by morning, all for just $29.99. Their concoctions might be green juice or appetite-suppressing lollipops instead of linseed oil and red pepper, but the hope they bottle and sell is every bit as potent and every bit as questionable. What's driving this unbroken spell? Maybe it's the uniquely American cocktail of optimism and restlessness. Maybe it's the nagging fear that everyone else has found an easier way, and you're just missing the memo. Or maybe, deep down, we're all just the 21st century descendants of those hopeful ranchers, forever reaching for a cure that lets us have our cake and eat it, too. In the end, whether it comes stashed in a wooden crate or drop-shipped by influencers, snake oil survives because it promises two things Americans crave: transformation and control, minus any real sacrifice. As long as we keep chasing the easy fix, there will always be someone ready to sell us a miracle. Side effects and reality checks not included. The radio's playing jazz and the ads promise slimmer ankles in just 10 days. Camel cigarettes are all the rage. Doctors recommend them for weight loss. The speakeasy serves low-calorie gin, but, spoiler, everyone's still hungry. Welcome to the Roaring Twenties, where the future is modern, fast, and almost criminally glamorous, and the pursuit of the perfect body is just as relentless as the Charleston beat. Let's slip behind the Art Deco curtains for a closer look. Not only were Victrolas blaring in every parlour, but a flood of advertising began to reshape American beliefs about food and beauty. For the first time, mass media showed women, and increasingly men, exactly who they were supposed to be. Slender, trim, willowy. The plump curves of earlier decades suddenly seem as out of date as a corset. Flappers didn't just rebel against social norms with their bobbed hair and bootleg cocktails. They also took an axe to the idea that a little extra was healthy. How was a gal supposed to keep up? Enter the marvels of modern science, or at least whatever could be made to sound scientific in the back pages of a magazine. "Eat what you want and melt away with marmola tablets," one ad trumpeted. Never mind the bootlegged ingredients or dubious side effects. Was that thumping in your chest from Charleston practice, or the amphetamines laced into your slimming pill? Tough to say. In those days, labelling standards were little more than a polite suggestion. Meanwhile, Hollywood was cranking out stars, with bodies seemingly sculpted from moonlight, and America was watching, sometimes hungrily. The silver screen idolized the ultra-thin, inspiring copycat diets everywhere. Fad plans like the cigarette diet. Yes, actual medical advice, light up instead of snack, became the rage. Lucky Strike's campaign, reach for a lucky instead of a sweet, sent sugar sales plummeting. A truly smoky solution. But cigarettes weren't the only dubious diet. Stand by. The pillbox, hat crowd, embraced vinegar shots, bananas and milk diets, or subsisting on nothing but grapefruit and black coffee. Science didn't always back these up, but devotion to the body beautiful required more faith than evidence. And lest we forget, beneath the flapper's fringe, there lingered a deep anxiety. What sort of woman would you be if you didn't fit into your beaded dress? Men didn't escape this hunger for transformation either. Dapper gents traded steak dinners for the promise of abdominal reducing belts that vibrated away your paunch, allegedly. Or they joined health clubs to try the new Swedish gymnastics craze, designed to make you ready for any emergency, social, or criminal. Even the jazz age had its self-improvement hustle. Still, each night, the speakeasies filled up, and the calorie-conscious flirted over glasses of low-booze cocktails, discreetly ignoring the rumble in their stomachs. In a decade addicted to speed, cars, stocks, gossip, and jazz, diets too promised rapid results. If you weren't thin yet, you just weren't modern enough. Yet for all its fads, the Roaring Twenties gave us something else. The irresistible notion that you could utterly reinvent yourself. With just the right regimen, the right brand, the right dance move, you might step out as someone new, a little lighter, a little nimbler, and certainly ready to keep up with the soundtrack of progress. The biggest diet secret of all. It was less about hunger and more about hope, less about loss, more about leaping forward into whatever tomorrow promised. As the band plays on and the ice rattles in distant cocktails, we're left with the real legacy of the 20s. A diet culture that's as dazzling, unsteady, and deeply human as the age itself. Just remember, if your ankles still aren't slimmer after 10 days, blame the Victrola, not the gin. The war is over, rationing is out, and grapefruit is suddenly in. Housewives are selling each other on cabbage soup, pineapple cleansers, and the daily agony of the only miracle, digesting all that roughage. By the late 1940s and early 50s, supermarkets gleamed with their fluorescent promise, aisle after aisle of abundance. The United States, flush with post-war optimism, saw food as both reward and responsibility. For the first time in decades, most Americans could choose what they ate rather than make do. What did they do with all this choice? They invented culinary chaos. The age of the fad diet had arrived. The air was thick with the scent of burnt toast and ambition. Magazine covers assured women, and, let's be honest, it was mostly women, that a 10-day Hollywood diet, grapefruit for breakfast, boiled egg for lunch, cottage cheese for spiritual enlightenment, could rebrand your body as quickly as a studio boss rebranded an ingenue. Hollywood stars lent their names to these quick fixes, trading recipes with radio hosts, and appearing in sponsored segments, extolling the virtues of slenderizing regimes. The silver screen offered not only escapism, but thinspiration. America was obsessed with transformation. Glamour and thinness were mass-produced, showcased in the thickness of Mae West's eyeliner and the thinness of her waist. Enter the cabbage soup diet. Chefs everywhere recoiled, but the rest of the nation surrendered. A boiling vat of cruciferous vegetables was now a household staple, stinking out kitchens and promising a new, lighter self in just a week. Friends swapped diet recipes and horror stories, somewhere between urban legend and culinary dare. Allied to this was the rise of diet pills and dubious elixirs. Pharmaceutical innovation met a public primed for shortcuts, and the post-war housewife could now supplement her daily regimen with appetite reducers from the corner store. These little miracles, often a cocktail of amphetamines, promised a house that sparkled, children with perfect posture, and a waistline to match. The new American woman was supposed to be tireless, ever smiling, a testament to what could be achieved with enough moxie, willpower, and time-release capsules. Ironically, the nation that celebrated plenty now embraced self-denial, but only in fits and starts, and preferably with a twist of glamour. There was the pineapple diet, infamous for its single-ingredient monotony and its uncanny ability to turn your tongue raw. The grapefruit diet, sometimes called the Mayo Clinic diet, though the clinic itself disavowed connection, became ballroom conversation fodder. By manipulating acids, enzymes, and allegedly the laws of thermodynamics, you too could lose 10 pounds by Friday. Dieting was serialized, gamified, almost a competitive sport. Women's magazines delivered a new plan each month, a new salvation from the ravages of figure faults. Each came wrapped in the language of science, even if their medical credentials were about as dubious as that can of condensed soup at the back of your pantry. Weight loss scientists appeared on television, white coats strategically starched, patiently explaining the art of calorie counting while nodding approvingly at the virtues of lemon water and self-restraint. This mania wasn't just about food, it was about hope, control, and belonging. Post-war America, after all, was inventing itself, on the scale and off. The mess, the laughter, the faint whiff of boiled cabbage, all part of a nation trying to find its post-war footprint, one bite-sized miracle at a time. By the close of the 1950s, yo-yo dieting had entered the lexicon, as had a new wariness toward quick fixes. But America, hungry for reinvention, had already written the first chapters of its ongoing affair with the fad diet, a romance equal parts slapstick, science fiction, and wishful thinking. Congratulations, you're grooving to the Beatles, but your doctor prescribes diet pills that double as jet fuel. Who needs lunch when your heart is beating 200 times per minute? Groovy, right? Back in the 60s, the phrase breakfast of champions took on a whole new meaning, and we're not talking Wheaties, but little pastel pills. In a decade hell-bent on chasing novelty, speed wasn't just a genre of music. Parents popped bennies while zooming from parent-teacher conferences to Tupperware parties, and, spoiler alert, nobody was eating the Jell-O. Weight loss, adult productivity, and existential liberation came pressed in a tablet stamped with the latest pharmaceutical optimism. You might imagine doctors in the 60s looked askance at doling out amphetamines for weight control. But the reality is that many were leading the charge. Fountain pens scribbling scripts for anyone who showed signs of nervous energy, which was code for living in America. The medical community, high on modernity and unbothered by tomorrow, saw amphetamines as miracle medicine. Curb your appetite, amp up your focus, conquer Monday morning malaise like a suburban Superman. Feeling sluggish? Eat less, do more, repeat, until consciousness shimmers. The drug companies rolled out amphetamines in shapes, colours, and flavours that looked like they'd been designed by Willy Wonka. You could pop a dexedrine before ironing, a benzedrine for the PTA, and a preludin if things got really wild at the sock hop. Housewives became astronauts, orbiting housework at light speed, all while refusing the offer of a sandwich. The pounds melted, and so, quietly, did a sense of reality. Amphetamines whispered promises, in neon, carefree days, thinner thighs, anxiety with a backbeat. They fit perfectly into the go-go world of mod fashion and moral panic. Headlines stoked fear of rock music and dope fiends. But an open secret lingered in suburbia. Half the PTA ran on something you couldn't get at the soda fountain. The line between prescription and party blurred. Were those uppers fueling late-night college cram sessions? Or were mum and dad just cutting carbs, 60s style? Of course, side effects were swept under those psychedelic rugs. The cheerful pills came with a tiny price tag, like insomnia, heart palpitations, and the existential dread of seeing yesterday's mascara at sunrise, because you haven't blinked since Thursday. Still, the collective appetite for thinness, for having it all, for keeping up with the Joneses, overrode the warnings. Besides, wasn't science progress? If government-approved speed was good enough for astronauts, hello, Mercury program, it was good enough for housewives, businessmen, jazz musicians, and half the cast of Laugh-In. The amphetamine boom wasn't just about body image. At its core was the illusion of control, a very American hunger. In a decade where everything was accelerating, music, hemlines, the space race, who wanted to be left behind by their metabolism? America's shadowy little secret. The drive for thinness and productivity could share the same prescription, and nobody would ask too many questions. Except maybe your cardiologist, if you bothered to see him. As the 60s spun into ever weirder shapes, the pill bottle became a totem. Part household appliance, part Pandora's box. The high wore off, but the habit lingered. Decades would pass before the public truly reckoned with the side effects. But by then, the idea of medicating away hunger was mainstream. The message had already sunk in deeper than a Beatles bass line. Thin is in, and chemical help is nothing to be ashamed of. Unless, of course, you get caught. Which most people didn't, or didn't care. The Sid Vicious 60s. When the soundtrack was electric, the metabolism was turbocharged, and lunch was strictly optional. Far out. The 1960s bring a new hope, community, points, and weirdly enthusiastic group weigh-ins. You're passing up cake for 0-point salad and feeling smug until the next day's carrot binge. But let's rewind a bit. The minds behind Weight Watchers weren't just calorie calculators. They were community builders. In 1963, Jeanne Nidetch, an ordinary housewife with an extraordinary sweet tooth, invited friends into her living room and, unintentionally, started a revolution. If you've ever bonded with a stranger over your mutual weakness for bread, imagine that multiplied by 10, then powered by mid-century optimism and polyester slacks. The genius of Weight Watchers wasn't just its points system, the eternal math homework of dieters everywhere. It was the creation of a tribe. Weekly meetings weren't only about accountability. They were about shared confessions and mutual encouragement. The ritual went something like this. Walk into a hall, step on a scale, usually in stocking feet, dignity optional, and nod gravely as a leader delivered the week's motivational talk. These sessions mixed vulnerability with comic relief. Think group therapy, but with more recipes for Jell-O salads and less psychoanalysis. For many, the scale became both a nemesis and a coach. There was camaraderie in shared struggle, the agony of the Sunday night binge, the glories of a pound lost. If you backslid, you weren't shamed. You were cheered back onto the wagon with gusto. Occasionally, overzealous members might demonstrate an almost militaristic zeal about tracking points, but these characters became the unofficial mascots of the movement. "Don't forget to log your celery," has likely echoed through countless church basements and school gyms. Weight Watchers co-opted the motivational language of self-improvement. But it did so at a time when many women were in search of connection. The post-war suburbs could be lonely, and the promise of a support group, complete with measured progress and public applause, offered more than just weight loss. It was, for many, the rare space to swap stories, vent frustrations, and champion each other's small victories. You could almost forget you were skipping the brownies. The meetings themselves were gently ritualistic. Weigh in, listen, share, set a target, repeat. There were success stories. A poster child who'd lost 50 pounds. The matronly regular who could finally zip her favourite dress. These figures provided living proof that change was possible. Less celebrated, perhaps, was the side-eye from the meeting leader when someone's weight inched upward. Still, the collective energy made setbacks feel temporary, and milestones, however modest, felt like Olympic victories. But maybe the secret magic was the structure. By translating vague willpower into actionable steps, with points assigned to every morsel and meeting notes shared with precision, Weight Watchers transformed dieting from a solitary battle into a collaborative mission. The personal journal, a sacred artifact of the program, became a confidant and witness to every stumble and leap. Success or failure wasn't a reflection of moral character, just the latest chapter in an ongoing saga. Across America, these gatherings became as ubiquitous as PTA meetings, a social mainstay where, just maybe, someone understood exactly what it felt like to crave an entire loaf of bread at midnight. The approach would be copied endlessly by later programs, but Weight Watchers had captured the spirit of the time. Change is possible, but it's easier and a lot more fun with allies. By the end of the decade, the organization wasn't just a diet. It was a phenomenon. Jean Nidetch had unwittingly democratized support groups, turning weigh in and share into a battle cry for self-betterment. For millions, the decades-old dilemma of dieting finally had an answer. You didn't have to do it alone. And if you left each meeting a little lighter in spirit, if not yet on the scale, all the better. Bell-bottoms, disco, and calorie counting are in. Diet sodas arrive, tasting like carbonated sadness. Saccharin comes with ominous warnings, but you keep drinking it anyway, because hey, bikini season. The 1970s were nothing if not ambitious. Everything was new and wild. Music, fashion, political scandals, and, oddly enough, our relationship with processed food. Enter Tab, the original diet soda, a pale pink can with a nearly medical pedestal in the fridge. Tab wasn't marketed as a treat. It was marketed as a cure, a sly invitation to participate in the national obsession with thinness, minus the pain of actual self-restraint. You'd never admit it tasted good, but you felt somehow brave for drinking it, like you could survive Tab, you could survive anything, even polyester. Of course, the key ingredient in these chemical miracles was saccharin, a name that sounds almost holy if you ignore the aftertaste and the relentless, barely whispered rumours. Did you hear? Saccharin could be dangerous, your neighbour confides, over her avocado green fence. Yet there it is, in your glass, fizzing away. The FDA slaps a warning label on it, but the public shrugs. We've been to Woodstock, the Moon, and Denny's at midnight. We're not scared of a sweetener. Meanwhile, calorie counting becomes a full-on cultural movement. Recipe cards show up promising sensible eating, and magazine ads ooze with guilt. Are you Beachbody ready? Housewives become amateur chemists, mixing packets of saccharin into everything from Jell-O salads to coffee, convinced that science this time is on their side. Somewhere between Slim Fast and the Weight Watchers point system, the 1970s kitchen morphs into a laboratory of flavour substitutes. Dieting is no longer about health, it's about looking the part, sleek, effortless, and always ready for a surprise Soul Train audition. The decade blends the miraculous and the absurd. News programs tout the latest breakthroughs. Now you can eat cake and still lose weight. But by cake, they mean something pale, rubbery, and vaguely vanilla, the culinary equivalent of a mood ring, interesting for a second, but ultimately disappointing. This wasn't just a personal quest for the perfect swimsuit season. There's a communal spirit to the madness, as friends gather to taste test the newest zero-calorie concoction. Is it any good? Mostly no. But the shared experience, the self-deprecating laughter, and the collective hope that maybe this time science has cracked the code, these are the real flavors of the 1970s diet craze. And let's not forget the rebellion. For every half-hearted sip of diet soda, there's someone rolling their eyes, sneaking a milkshake, or quietly swapping packets of equal for real sugar. Snackwell's cookies and carob chips make their debuts, but no one's happy about it. The genius of the era is that it's completely, gloriously self-aware. Everyone knows it's a farce, but everyone's in on it. Decades later, the legacy of the 1970s' delicious mistakes lingers. Tab becomes a cult classic, saccharine a trivia question, and the idea of dieting as a lifestyle choice, well, that one sticks around. The decade leaves behind a bittersweet aftertaste, like the saccharin itself. Artificial, sure, but with a definite kick. The decade may have been dressed in questionable fabric and questionable science, but at least it knew how to throw a good party. Questionable drinks included. So next time you spot a can of Tab in a vintage display, remember what it represents. A time when America aimed for perfection, armed with disco balls, calculator watches, and an endless supply of pink soda. Perhaps we were chasing something that never quite existed, but the journey, bizarre, hopeful, and unapologetically weird, was always worth a sip. Leotards, leg warmers, and sweating to Richard Simmons. Calories are cowering in fear. Just like your joints, you briefly consider opening a tofu bakery, but then you remember donuts. Welcome to the golden age of home fitness, where your living room transformed into a battleground between self-improvement and snack-induced inertia. The jazzercise era wasn't just a trend. It was an all-out culture war, waged with neon spandex, cassette tapes, and VHS workouts. And if you didn't have a subscription to Self magazine, could you even call yourself enlightened? Every commercial break was another chance to feel the burn, even if the only burning you felt was your pride after attempting a grapevine step and nearly obliterating a coffee table. Picture it. You, standing in front of the TV, hands on hips, trying to keep up with Denise Austin's relentless optimism. "It's just fun," she chirped, sweat glistening as if exertion was some form of spiritual enlightenment. Meanwhile, your sweat glands were staging a coup, and your quads composed angry letters to your future self. Each routine promised the same thing: thinner thighs, a six-pack by summer, and a sense of control in a world where microwaves still befuddled most families. Let's talk fashion. Fitness wasn't fitness unless your outfit doubled as disco attire. The brighter the colour, the greater the calorie deficit, or so conventional wisdom claimed. Headbands, scrunchies, and leotards in colours unseen in the natural world. Wardrobe malfunctions were part of the workout. If your tights didn't at least threaten rupture at the seams, were you even trying? For a moment, you convinced yourself that you belonged to an exclusive club. Card-carrying members of the sweat now regret later brigade. But behind those high kicks and forced smiles, there lingered a darker truth. Pain. Not your run-of-the-mill muscle soreness, but a nationwide epidemic of thrown backs, wrenched knees, and dignity left somewhere between step 2 and step 3 of the jazz square. Sure, the infomercials promised you'd feel energized, empowered, renewed. In reality, you spent 20 minutes winded and another 40 wondering if your health insurance covered extreme ambition. But the miracle lay in the sense of community, neighbors peering curiously through windows, kids using your discarded dumbbells as lightsabers, pets treating exercise mats as nap time invitations, all part of the lived experience. No one escaped unscathed. Posture, a fond memory, joints, liability waiting to happen. But pride, immeasurable. There was genuine camaraderie, that sense of I did it, even if it was only half the video and a prolonged water break. Some may mock, but only those who have never knocked over a houseplant doing a two-step truly know the satisfaction of genuine effort. And afterward, let's be honest, there was always food. All that sweating provided the moral leverage for an extra slice of pizza, or let's face it, a pile of donuts that cancelled out the best intentions. The contradictions were part of the charm. Sweating in pursuit of health, then rewarding yourself in pursuit of happiness. Who were we to break the cycle? Looking back, the jazzercise generation proved something important. Discipline and indulgence aren't always opposites. Sometimes they hold hands and grapevine across the linoleum, reminding you that the journey to wellness is rarely linear and almost always hilarious. The legacy lives on, less in the sculpted thighs and more in the willingness to look silly, leap high, and go for it, no matter whether you stick the landing or tumble into the couch. As the last synth note fades and the infomercial urges you to keep going, you realize regret is temporary, but memories of the jazzercise generation are forever. Besides, there's always tomorrow, another tape, another workout, and of course, another donut. Somebody convinced everyone that lemonade with cayenne pepper could fix anything. Fasting is in, food is out, and you're daydreaming about toast. Don't worry, the chia seeds are right around the corner. Picture this. It's 1984. You're in neon spandex, hair teased to the ceiling, humming along to Madonna. But this decade, for all its glitz, is running on empty. Quite literally. Because suddenly, everyone is cleansing. Juice fasting, water fasting, cabbage soup, detoxes, you name it. Having an appetite? So passé. Instead, the ethos of the era was clear. A slimmer, shinier you is just a few sips, and maybe a side of irritability, away. Behind many closed kitchen doors, blenders whirred with mysterious concoctions. Every self-help guru, every talk show, and every infomercial had the secret to cleaning out your insides. Never mind that most of these so-called toxins were as elusive as a well-behaved flock of seagulls' haircut. The Master Cleanse, a brew of fresh lemon juice, maple syrup, and cayenne, captured the public imagination, promising to melt away pounds and sins alike. People reported feeling lighter, more energized, as though the bypassing of solid food was the shortcut to enlightenment. In truth, there was a lot of lightheadedness and a growing national craving for carbohydrates. Magazines declared that fasting sharpens the mind, while diet books spoke ominously of toxic buildup and the dangers lurking in last night's lasagna. There were cautionary tales, grandmothers who awoke to discover their grandsons eating sticks of butter out of desperation, or co-workers sneaking jelly beans at their desks, swearing it didn't count. Yet the fad spread because to be clean was to be fashionable, and because the idea of resetting the body held a retro-futuristic allure. Even celebrities got in on the action. There are stories of movie stars surviving on saltwater and hot sauce while filming blockbusters, as stylists buzzed around offering encouragement and black coffee. The rationale? A curious blend of Eastern philosophy and Western marketing. Suddenly, words like toxins, detox, and purify filled ad copy. Detox teas, fasting kits, and miracle supplements multiplied on store shelves. Spokespeople in pristine white lab coats broke it down for us. It wasn't just about losing weight. It was about rebirth. Who needed food when you could feast on self-discipline and the promise of a brand new you? But the 1980s cleanse craze, for all its contradictions, wasn't without its unintended comedy. These rituals required patience, not to mention willpower, or, failing that, a large hidden stash of crackers. People clipped out recipes and compared notes, but the truth was, most cleansers ended the week with a mild headache, a fresh appreciation for solid food, and the sense that perhaps, just perhaps, the body's organs already knew how to cleanse themselves. Still, the idea that you could shed the past with a few days of fasting left its mark. The cleanse craze planted seeds. Literally, chia seeds would soon follow, for a booming industry of health rituals, detox diets, and Instagrammable smoothies. Wellness had arrived, hustling side by side with hair gel and rollerblades. The 80s obsession with fasting and cleansing was a cultural reset, equal parts penance, performance, and wishful thinking. Looking back, we realize that while lemonade and cayenne might not fix everything, they did give us some memorable stories and a collective yearning for breakfast. So, as the 80s blend into the 90s, society is left a little lighter, a touch hungrier, and primed for the next big thing. The arrival of seeds, greens, and new fads, ready to fill the void that fasting left behind. The 1990s arrive, bringing every imaginable miracle, shake, pill, and program, often sold by your most persistent neighbor. You drink your meal out of a neon-colored bottle and hope nobody notices. Your energy level is approximately hibernating bear. It seemed like overnight, the diet landscape was no longer dominated by old-school calorie counting or bland aerobics VHS tapes. Suddenly, there was a new promise in town: total transformation, courtesy of whatever was sloshing around inside that vaguely radioactive sports bottle. While the packaging screamed energy, vitality, and instant results, the reality was more often a stomach-gnawing kind of hunger, quickly remedied by, surprise, another meal replacement bar with the consistency of both cardboard and regret. But these weren't just any products, they came with an origin story. The shakes weren't simply delicious. They were formulated by leading Swiss nutritionists. Actual Swiss origin not guaranteed. The appetite suppressant pills, developed after years of astronaut research, as if eating freeze-dried ice cream while floating in zero gravity was the secret the rest of us had been missing. They promised to unlock a slimmer, more energetic you without sacrificing your social life, weekday popcorn habit, or apparently your wallet. Of course, you didn't just stumble upon these magic potions. They arrived on your doorstep, thanks to the neighbor you avoided in the grocery store aisles. Multi-level marketing, or MLMs, had cracked the code. Each opportunity was sold with the infectious enthusiasm of someone who genuinely believed every shake was a ticket to personal transformation and, importantly, potential retirement income. All you have to do is drink 2 shakes a day, tell your friends about it, and watch the pounds and commissions melt away. If only it were that simple. Coffee dates turned into subtle, then not so subtle, sales pitches. Old school friends re-emerged on caller ID, freshly armed with the business opportunity of a lifetime and a starter kit full of plastic scoops and color-coded water bottles. The promise was always twofold: the physique of your dreams and the tantalizing hope of passive income, as though a new life was just one direct debit away. In this ecosystem, fitness was suddenly as much about community and belief as it was about nutrition or exercise. Before you could say auto shop subscription, your pantry overflowed with an array of barely digestible bars and mysterious herbal supplements. If you managed to keep up, Drinking meal replacements on schedule became a ritual, part self-punishment, part group bonding. Support groups cropped up. Some met in living rooms, others in church basements. Accountability was the new buzzword. As you compared notes on how to blend your shakes without gagging and shared tips on ignoring hunger pangs while organising Tupperware parties. Progress was measured not just in inches lost, but in downlines expanded. Behind the pastel packaging and motivational slogans lurked darker realities. The science behind many miracle products was dubious at best and downright dangerous at worst. Diet shakes with more sugar than a can of soda, fat burners that left you jittery and unable to sleep, and detox teas with effects best not discussed in polite company. Each success story seemed to come with an asterisk the size of a phone book. Yet, in spite of the disappointments, and sometimes because of them, MLMs thrived. Each failed product was easily replaced by another, slightly more exotic blend, hawked with the same relentless optimism. Maybe the last one didn't work because your body was toxic, the new sales pitch went. This one cleanses every cell. Hope, after all, is the most renewable resource. By the end of the decade, most pantries were graveyards of half-empty canisters and abandoned shaker bottles. Nutrition science would eventually catch up, debunking many of the decade's more outlandish claims. But for a while, we all sipped, swallowed, and sold the dream. One neon bottle at a time. It's the 2000s. Bread is the enemy, bacon is the solution, and you're sneaking croissants in the car. Your friends can't look at a potato without flinching. This is the era when Dr. Robert Atkins, with his signature diet book, stormed into the mainstream consciousness like a carb-hating preacher. Virtually overnight, pasta was exiled from polite society, and grocery stores became battlegrounds. Banners boasted low carb, like it was a badge of moral superiority, and every second commercial seemed to show a smiling person dropping loaves of bread in slow motion. For decades, fat had been the villain, but now, in a seismic reversal, fat was allowed back in the house, so long as it didn't show up holding hands with starch. Eggs and steak became breakfast darlings. Pancakes, unless cloaked in almond flour, were excommunicated. Culturally, the Atkins diet wasn't just a trend. It became a movement, almost a religion. Believers quoted Dr. Atkins like scripture. The net carb calculation, fiber subtracted, sugar alcohols debated, turned nutrition labels into magic spells only the initiated could interpret. Diet talk was everywhere, from water coolers to dinner parties, with everyone vying to outdo their tales of heroic pizza abstinence, and everywhere the rise of low-carb substitutes, pseudo-breads, sugarless candies that doubled as laxatives, and ominously dense slabs of meatloaf marked a desperate search for ways to enjoy forbidden pleasures without straying from the path. The science, or at least the science by headline, seemed to back up the craze. Some studies did show that low-carb dieters lost weight faster in the first few months compared to those on traditional low-fat plans. News outlets trumpeted these findings as proof that Atkins had cracked the code, and, for a time, it looked like Dr. Atkins would be crowned the new Einstein of weight loss. Supermarkets rearranged shelves, restaurants scrambled to add Atkins-friendly options, and bread makers found themselves in crisis mode. Entire careers in baking threatened by a single diet book. Yet, for every Atkins devotee, there was a skeptic. Doctors raised eyebrows over what sacrificing whole grains and fruits might do long-term, and tales of low-carb fatigue and social isolation. Try explaining to your grandmother why you brought a Tupperware of sausage to Thanksgiving. Began to seep into the diet's reputation. There were reports of headaches, persistent bad breath, and even cases of people gaining back all the weight, plus a little extra, once the parade of cheese and deli meat got old. The initial thrill and rapid weight loss, many found, was often just water being shed, not permanent fat. But by then, the low-carb genie was out of the bottle. The cultural impacts, though, outlasted the height of the craze. Even after the Atkins bubble burst and low-carb bars went on clearance, the corruption of carbohydrates' reputation lingered. New diets like South Beach and Keto picked up Atkins' banner, promising a more balanced, clean, or scientific approach, but always united in their suspicion of breadbaskets. Food manufacturers, never missing a beat, rolled out entire product lines, promising fewer carbs and friendlier labels, so that even a trip down the cereal aisle became a negotiation with your conscience. Ironically, while Americans were eating fewer bagels, they were wolfing down more processed meats and cheese slices than ever. Cutting carbs became shorthand for being healthy. Never mind what the rest of your plate looked like. Looking back now, the low-carb madness feels like a necessary chapter in the ever-spiraling saga of fad diets. It forced a national conversation about the role of insulin, the oversimplification of calories in, calories out, and just how quickly our tastes and beliefs could be swayed by a clever book and celebrity endorsements. Most of all, it cemented one truth. When it comes to the great diet debates, bread will always be on trial, and the court of public opinion is as fickle as it is carb-conscious. You've never seen so many photos of kale. Everything is gluten-free, dairy-free, and taste-free. The only thing more exhausted than you is your credit card after buying coconut flour. It begins, innocently enough. A friend starts posting about her gut health journey. Suddenly, everything is spiralized, and plates that look like they were arranged by botanical garden staff invade your feed. Forget Transformation Tuesday. This is transformation every snack. What used to be a humble apple is now diced, posed on a reclaimed wood chopping board, flanked by a chia pudding smiling in a mason jar. Filtering, contrast bumping, and somehow a candlelit glow for your breakfast. The saga continues when you're invited out to brunch. Remember Eggs Benedict? Now the eggs are replaced by tofu. The muffins reinvented as sweet potato hash, and the hollandaise is inexplicably made with soaked cashews. Your friend beams, "You can't even taste the difference." She is right, because there isn't any taste left at all. You smile, chew politely, and secretly yearn for the days when clean eating just meant rinsing your hands before dinner. On Instagram, the war for wellness wages on with fierce devotion. There are the paleo crusaders declaring jihad on legumes. The keto commandos take selfies next to piles of bacon, as if a stack of Hormel was the last defense against modern disease. The smoothie bowl brigade arranges fruit so ornately, it feels sacrilegious to take the first spoonful. Don't even think about posting your scrambled eggs or toast unless every item has a hashtag longer than the meal's ingredient list. Clean eating, gut health. Plant-powered avocado magic. Blessed. Recipes, if you can even call them that, read like scavenger hunts at a trendy farmer's market. For this guiltless brownie, you'll need 17 ingredients, none of which your grandmother has heard of. Lucuma powder, maca root, and vaguely accusatory super seeds that come in a pouch marked with Sanskrit. Directions: blend, bless, refrigerate, and photograph. Do not, under any circumstances, actually enjoy. And what about the gurus? These Instagram warriors, forever smiling in white athleisure, always backlit by Californian sunsets, preach the gospel of food purity. There are strict commandments. Thou shalt not microwave. Thou shalt banish anything ending in O's. Cow's milk is treated with the suspicion usually reserved for radiated waste. Their feeds become sermons, extolling detox teas and miracle broths. But behind the scenes, there's a dark sibling rivalry. Did Rachel get more likes on her aquafaba meringues than Brianna did on her charcoal pancakes? Is turmeric toast still in? Each day, these wellness warriors raise the stakes. The food gets purer, the claims more grandiose, the cooking techniques ever more arcane. Even the audience is pulled under the spell. Soon you, yes you, are in the organic aisle, squinting at a bottle of oat milk that costs more than your phone bill and debating whether the $20 artisanal nut butter is really worth it. It isn't. You find yourself apologizing for eating white rice at family dinners and, worst of all, worrying that your lunch isn't photogenic enough. Ironically, the more these food warriors push for clean eating, the further we march into a tangled jungle of anxiety, guilt, and self-doubt, armed only with quinoa and good intentions. The food gets more complicated, the joy gets more elusive, and we're left wondering when enjoying a slice of pizza became a rebellious act. So, next time you scroll through a forest of detox and pure hashtags sprouting on your feed, remember, maybe the cleanest, healthiest thing you can do is just eat what you enjoy, preferably before it gets cold, while you try to capture the perfect photo. You're tracking every calorie, step, and REM cycle. It's all science, except when it's just plain weird. Ever tried drinking butter in your coffee? Welcome to 2016, biohacking. A word that conjures images of tinkerers in high-tech garages, but in reality, most of us started with duct-taped Fitbits and that one friend who swore their cold showers were optimizing mitochondrial function. It's quantified self, except somehow you end up quantifying every second, from heart rate variability to how many spoonfuls of chia pudding you can tolerate before your soul leaves your body. Sometimes it feels less like wellness, more like voluntarily joining a very polite, data-driven cult. But there's a certain thrill in being your own experiment. The age-old tradition of self-improvement revamped for the era of wearables and Reddit rabbit holes. Your new hobbies include saliva testing, sleep tracking, and timing your coffee to the precise moment your circadian rhythm says, "Let's party." You start trusting the numbers over your own feelings. If your sleep tracker says you had a bad night, there's a good chance you'll yawn your way through morning, even if you woke up feeling fine. Enter intermittent fasting. Suddenly, breakfast is cancelled, not just for today, but for the foreseeable future. The new gospel proclaims, if you don't eat until noon, you'll live forever, or at least until your next Zoom call. Cue the period of hunger as badge of honor. Fasting apps become a diary of your willpower, and the hours you spend not eating are somehow more important than the meals themselves. Yet there's a strange camaraderie here. A smugness, yes, but also the knowledge that in some small way, you're pushing the boundaries of what your body can endure. One cold brew at a time. Of course, for every scholarly article touting the benefits of time-restricted eating, there's an equal and opposite lineup of skeptical relatives at the dinner table. You mean to tell me you're paying for an app that reminds you when not to eat? But in the world of low-carb recipes and nootropics, logic is sometimes optional. Biohacking is as much about rebelling against big breakfast as it is about health. Let's not forget the experimental aspect. Supplements with names that sound more like alien planets than things you should put in your mouth. Rhodiola, ashwagandha, MCT oil. glucose monitors for people who aren't diabetic. Just curious and maybe a little competitive. There are podcasts hosted by men who have built their personal brands on being the world's most optimized guinea pigs. Because why let actual scientists have all the fun? But beneath the absurdity is a real yearning. The desire for control in a body that is, for most of us, an impenetrable black box. If a spreadsheet can offer reassurance, if 12 hours without food can give you the illusion of mastery, maybe it's worth the weird stares when you ask for butter in your coffee at Starbucks. And yes, some of it works. You might genuinely feel sharper after your half-day fast, or notice that your smartwatch is guilting you into going for that extra walk at lunch. At its best, biohacking offers regular people a gateway into self-awareness and a touch more ownership over their day-to-day well-being. At its worst, it's snake oil with better branding and a lot more data. So, you stumble on, oscillating between the highs of weird discoveries and the lows of minor, self-imposed misery. You track, you tweak, you test, certain that the road to enlightenment is paved with Bluetooth scales and protein powder. In the process, you become both the scientist and the lab rat, sometimes gloriously, sometimes absurdly, but almost always with the sense that you're pushing human experience just a little further into the unknown. Welcome to the era of the human guinea pig. The experiment is ongoing. The only thing more suspicious than detox tea is the sponsored ad for it. Everyone is cleansing. Nobody can stop talking about their bathroom routine. And you suddenly long for the days when appetite suppressants were just called black coffee. It's a tale as old as time, or at least as old as #culture. You're scrolling through Instagram, and suddenly there's your favorite influencer, perhaps someone whose claim to fame is flawless skin, impeccable lighting, and apparently a near pathological love for herbal blends that arrive in matte pastel packaging. "It changed my life," they'll gush, clutching a mug as though it contains the Holy Grail. But instead of eternal youth or wisdom, this mystical beverage offers only the promise of going to the bathroom a lot. Let's be honest, no one genuinely enjoys the effects of detox teas. If they did, they'd be snapping selfies in a pharmacy laxative aisle, not draped across luxury bedding in a $100 bikini. But the power of social media snake oil isn't just in the far-fetched claims. It's in the marketing wizardry that preys on insecurity and FOMO, and apparently the collective short-term memory loss that makes us all forget what happened the last time we tried one of these miracle products. What makes these teas so seductive is the potent cocktail of pseudo-scientific buzzwords and glamorous endorsements. Terms like eliminate toxins, supercharge metabolism, and naturally suppress appetite get tossed around. But good luck finding any actual science backing them. Somehow, if you slap a word like cleanse on a package and set it next to a ring light, people convince themselves it's practically medical advice. You wouldn't take financial tips from someone whose previous job was prom queen. So why do we buy into wellness trends promoted by people whose main qualification is a symmetrical face? The influencers are, of course, at the center of this digital soap opera. They're the high priests and priestesses of the cleanse cult, and their rituals are live-streamed. Elaborate unboxings, recipes for detox iced lattes, and cheerful status updates about bowel movements. Their following is a mix of adoring acolytes, half-doubtful lurkers, and, inevitably, skeptics who can't help but comment, "Just eat a salad, Jessica." But even skepticism fuels the beast. Every view boosts the algorithm. Every comment keeps the ads coming. It would almost be funny if it weren't so insidious. For every person with the basic sense to laugh at the absurdity, there's another, perhaps younger, or more vulnerable, who's quietly wondering if maybe they should skip lunch and buy that tea. The influencer economy is built on these conversions, one swipe up at a time. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry, proof that you can bottle insecurity and sell it with free shipping and a discount code. But maybe the most astonishing part is how genuinely unnecessary these products are. Your liver and kidneys don't need help from lemon-flavored teas that cost more than an actual doctor's visit. The human body has been detoxing itself quite efficiently for thousands of years. The only real thing these teas eliminate is the money from your bank account, and perhaps, temporarily, your dignity. Still, the wellness industrial complex marches on, reinventing the same old snake oil with vegan-friendly packaging and Instagram-friendly hashtags. So the next time you see a filtered, beaming influencer touting the latest life-changing detox, remember, true health rarely comes in a sachet with a promo code. And as for the bathroom updates, some things should remain a mystery. The doctor's office is no longer a safe haven. Pills, injections, and bariatric surgery are on the table. And you're given 33 pamphlets explaining why the side effects are totally worth it. The conversation begins innocently enough. Have you tried diet and exercise? Followed by the gentle suggestion that maybe it's time to consider medical options. These words are carefully chosen, delivered softly, as though a little kindness can soften the blow that your body is now something to be fixed. You nod because you trust your doctor, and truthfully, you're exhausted. Because who wouldn't want a medical miracle? Who wouldn't want the fat to melt away with a prescription slip? A bit of clinical magic. Soon, you find yourself in a carousel of options. There are GLP-1 agonists like Ozempic and Wegovy, each promising weight loss without willpower. Just a whim, a copay, and a willingness to accept a litany of side effects. Nausea, diarrhea, occasional thyroid tumours that are rare, but, we have to mention it. The glossy pamphlet smiling at you offers reassurance that the discomfort, the inconvenience, the risks are worth it. You're told these medications are life-changing. For some, this is true. For others, the promises unravel in a haze of fatigue, food aversions, and the nagging sense that something about this fix feels a little off. And then there's surgery. The reset button, pitched by every weight loss clinic. Bariatric surgery is framed as an act of self-care, the ultimate commitment to health. You are presented with before and after graphs, patient testimonials, and a binder the size of a phone book listing potential complications. You are, of course, the ideal candidate, provided you sign the waivers, accept the risks, and agree to a lifetime of vitamin supplements and routine blood work. The procedure itself is branded as minimally invasive. The recovery, they say, will be uncomfortable, but short-lived. But no one speaks much about the mourning, that deep, private grief for the relationship you once had with food, for the parts of you that felt like yours, even when they were wrapped up in shame. It's easy, amid the clinical jargon and efficiency of modern medicine, to forget that every prescription is a story, every surgery a reckoning. The medicalization of weight loss is rarely about health alone. It is about expectations, what bodies are supposed to look like, what stories get written in our charts versus the realities we live in our skin. And the underlying drumbeat, always, is that the pursuit of thinness is a noble battle, that fatigue, discomfort, and pain are just the toll you pay to cross into acceptability. Yet, if you step back, you can see how the landscape has shifted. Not so long ago, medication for weight management was a last resort. Now, it's fast becoming a first line, marketed not just as treatment for obesity, but as a quick fix for anyone tired of their reflection. There is ample medical evidence for these interventions, yes, and, for some, they offer genuine relief from chronic health conditions. But the avalanche of advertising, the insistent "ask your doctor today" campaigns, and the normalization of surgery as solution blur the distinction between care and commerce. As you leave the exam room, pamphlets in hand, options swirling in your mind, you wonder if you are being empowered or simply processed. If all these innovations are really about your health, or if you've become the newest frontier in a market hungry for solutions. Perhaps the most radical act is to pause, to question, to insist on seeing yourself as more than a diagnosis, more than a before in someone else's promotional material. Because beneath the white coats and shiny brochures, the most important story about your body is the one only you can tell. It's diet déjà vu, a diabetes drug that might be the answer to every question ever asked in a group chat. Prescriptions skyrocket, so do dinner party debates about insulin, semaglutide, and which celebrities are on it. Ozempic, generic name semaglutide, is technically for people with type 2 diabetes. But don't tell your cousin's friend who suddenly shed 30 pounds, or your boss who seems a little too interested in speaking about the science. Any medication with a name that sounds like a Scandinavian synth band was obviously going to catch on. Next thing you know, the usual suspects, morning talk show hosts, podcasters, and fitness influencers who look suspiciously less relatable than they did last Christmas, are weighing in, both literally and figuratively. Let's unravel what's really happening. Originally developed to help manage blood sugar, semaglutide has a side effect Big Pharma never bothered to print in bold: a dramatically reduced appetite. It's like a willpower cheat code, and suddenly, everyone from bored suburbanites to Silicon Valley execs are slamming the subscribe and save button. Just like Costco protein bars, except with more buzz and significantly fewer chocolate chips. Cue a gold rush. Demand explodes, and so does confusion. Someone on Instagram claims their friend lost 50 pounds without even trying. Your mum's book club is now one part medical experiment, one part tabloid, dissecting every detail of the latest People cover. Meanwhile, doctors are stuck in an endless loop of explaining the difference between off-label uses and formal recommendations. Spoiler, there's not an FDA badge for prescribed because Sharon thinks it'll fit into her skinny jeans by August. The fascination goes beyond body image. Ozempic has managed to lodge itself in the cultural imagination, almost by accident. Suddenly there's speculation that the drug is the secret sauce behind every conspicuous Hollywood transformation. Did you notice how every awards ceremony now looks like an ad for bespoke tailoring and the promise of a smaller waist? Coincidence? Please. Tabloids become amateur pharmacologists overnight, connecting red carpet appearances with pharma patents and insurance copays. It's the 21st century version of reading tea leaves, except now we're doing it on social media, while swiping through endless before and after photos. And underneath the memes and side-eye, there's always a darker current. Who gets access to Ozempic? Running out of stock for diabetics. Oops. The medicine cabinet revolution promises personal transformation, but it can leave the people who actually need the drug, hello, diabetics, watching nervously as Instagram's wellness warriors clear out the shelves. Add a dash of public health anxiety. Isn't this just another quick fix? Ask skeptics. And they're not wrong. Weight loss history is paved with miracle potions and headline-grabbing failures. Fen-phen, Dexatrim, cabbage soup, all ghosts at the Ozempic feast. Welcome to a world where every easy answer splits in two. Cynicism on one fork, champagne and salads on the other. If you thought keto wars were dramatic, wait until your group chat has a civil war over injectables. By now, Ozempic has transcended the pharmacy shelf and become a signifier, an easy reference point for anybody trying to signal they're in the know about both science and status. Oh, you haven't heard? It's practically a personality type. There's even backlash to the backlash. Don't shame people just because they wanted to feel better. Cut to exposés, think pieces, and endless TikToks featuring nurses, celebrities, and those with absolutely no medical training, all staking out moral and scientific ground with the confidence of TED Talk hosts. Ozempic didn't just enter the conversation. It rewrote the script, resetting expectations about what a prescription drug can do and what we're willing to believe about ourselves for the right results. The miracle drug of our era, depending on who you ask, can be a blessing, a curse, or just another chapter in modern America's love affair with transformation, shortcuts, and the next big thing. All this from the little shot that could. Welcome to the new age of diet déjà vu, brought to you by Ozempic, your favourite Scandinavian synth band/miracle drug. The red carpet is suddenly a medical conference, but with better lighting. Celebrities drop cryptic hints on talk shows, and Instagram explodes with speculation. You weigh the pros and cons of fame versus being able to eat nachos. Gone are the days when the conversation beneath the glimmer and flashbulbs was about couture designers or secret beauty hacks, whispered between sips of sponsored green juice. Now, speculation swirls around injections, prescription slips and the very visible transformation of bodies once declared aspirational. Pundits and fans alike search for clues. Did this actress's cheekbones always do that? Is that a shadow or a testimony to science? Zoomed in red carpet, photos become medical case studies, analysed not just by celebrity watchers, but by everyone with a TikTok account and an opinion. The Ozempic aesthetic, a phrase that started out as a whisper, but now gallops through group chats and wellness newsletters. It refers not just to a body that's leaner, but to an entire cultural vibe, a new, effortless slenderness, the kind that promises discipline, but with an undertone of pharmaceutical assistance no mere yoga class can supply. In this moment, beauty standards feel quantifiable, injectable, trackable by the month. There's a public negotiation underway between authenticity and the latest highly managed version of yourself. Because suddenly, being relatable is about admitting, sort of, to being on a wellness journey, never named, just heavily implied. Of course, celebrities shape culture, for better or worse. When a few marquee names are rumoured to have substituted bread for bi-weekly injections, the cascade begins. Suddenly, it's not enough to eat clean or just work hard. Nutritionists, influencers, and even bored dermatologists rush into the breach, offering expert opinions on TV and podcasts. Morning shows are suddenly health panels. Paparazzi, deprived of new angles, now hunt for pharmacy bags instead of secret lovers. Everyone becomes an amateur medical ethicist, deploying words like GLP-1 agonist over brunch. But behind the glamour and self-optimization is another story. A mix of envy, anxiety, and a dash of incredulity. The new biology of beauty is the latest frontier in unattainable standards. The possibility of medicalizing aesthetics, being able to literally inject a look, raises a new, distinctly modern form of what psychologists politely call compare and despair. No longer is there plausible deniability. The change can be sudden, dramatic, and, at least in public, unsolvable. Bodies are at once more controlled and more mysterious. The internet's reaction oscillates between awe, shame, and outright rebellion. Think normalized nachos memes and think pieces about injectable privilege. As always, there are consequences. Some embrace the new ideal, others push back, spotlighting side effects, long-term risks, or the financial barriers that keep such transformations the preserve of an elite few. Tabloid headlines morph into PSAs. Is that a glow or a warning sign? Meanwhile, satirical accounts lampoon the absurdity. Celebrities just like us, except for the endocrinologists on speed dial. With every social media cycle, the boundaries between health trend and celebrity branding become ever more porous. After all, what is a wellness journey, if not a rebrand with a prescription pad? And in the din, something is lost. The myth of effortless beauty wears thin, replaced by the more transactional allure of pharmaceutical progress. As the public puzzles out what's real and what's rendered by medical technology, the conversation eventually returns to where it began. What does it mean to be human? To aspire? To struggle against gravity, whether by willpower, surgery, or syringe? Maybe there's something reassuring about our ongoing obsession with celebrity bodies, proof that, even in the age of Ozempic, we're all still looking for an easier way to be admired, envied, or just a little bit happier in our own skin. What's actually happening inside your body when you take Ozempic? Let's talk about blood sugar, appetite, and the side effects nobody mentions in polite conversation. First things first, Ozempic isn't magic. It's a medication with a well-understood mechanism of action, but like every tool in medicine, it works best in the right context and with realistic expectations. The core of Ozempic's power comes from its active ingredient, semaglutide. Semaglutide belongs to a class of drugs called GLP-1 receptor agonists. Now, unless you've spent a lot of time in medical school, that probably doesn't mean much. In simple terms, GLP-1 is a hormone our bodies naturally produce after we eat. Its job is to act as a messenger, telling the pancreas to release just the right amount of insulin, while also dialing down the release of another hormone called glucagon, which raises blood sugar. The result? Blood sugar stays within a much healthier range. But that's just the beginning. What really makes Ozempic headline news, and the reason it's found such a passionate following, not just among people with type 2 diabetes, but with those looking to lose weight, is how it transforms the way your brain thinks about food. When you take Ozempic, semaglutide mimics that natural GLP-1 hormone, sending signals to the brain's appetite centers. Suddenly, you're not as hungry. You feel full faster. Maybe, for the first time in years, you can walk past a plate of cookies without feeling them calling your name. For a lot of people, this is life-changing. Clinical research backs this up. In rigorous studies involving thousands of participants, people taking Ozempic for diabetes and weight loss consistently lost more weight compared to those on placebo. Average weight loss varies. Some people shed just a few pounds, others significantly more, often depending on lifestyle, diet, and starting body weight. But the numbers are impressive enough to spark headlines around the world. Blood sugar control is also dramatically improved, with many patients seeing their A1C, that's a measure of long-term blood glucose, drop to healthier levels. However, with every benefit comes a flip side. One thing that doesn't get discussed enough is Ozempic's effect on the digestive system. Remember the side effects nobody mentions in polite conversation. Think nausea, vomiting, or diarrhea, especially in the early weeks. Why? Because slowing down stomach emptying is part of how Ozempic works. Your stomach holds onto food longer, giving your brain plenty of time to register fullness. But that also means meals can feel heavier, and stomach upsets are common. Some folks experience constipation too. Most of these side effects fade as your body adjusts, but for some, they can be a deal breaker. Beyond the gut, there are a few other factors to keep in mind. A tiny number of patients experience fluctuations in mood or energy. Rarely, more serious risks show up: pancreatitis, gallbladder problems, or even changes in vision. That's why regular follow-ups with your healthcare provider are essential. It's not something to DIY. What about those who say Ozempic stopped working after a few months? This is a real phenomenon. Like with many appetite-regulating medications, the body can adapt over time. Weight loss may plateau. Hunger might creep back in. This isn't proof that Ozempic doesn't work. It's a reminder that biology is stubborn, and weight management is a marathon, not a sprint. Perhaps the most misunderstood aspect of Ozempic is that it doesn't work in isolation. People who see the best results combine medication with real changes: eating better, moving more, prioritizing sleep. Ozempic tips the scales, but you're still the one in control. So, does Ozempic really work? For most people, yes. If you understand what it's doing and not doing inside your body, and if you're ready to meet it halfway. It isn't a cure or a quick fix, but it's a game changer for many who felt stuck for years. And that, more than any headline, is where the real science and the real hope lies. It turns out, even miracle drugs have a catch. The bathroom scale starts to tremble. You wonder if you're one mysterious side effect away from starring in your own cautionary tale. You imagine it now. A reenactment on late-night TV. They thought they'd found the answer, until someone who looks a bit like you stares in horror at a prescription bottle while ominous music plays. A narrator with an unsettlingly deep voice intones the words. But nobody warned them about the consequences. Cut to your soapy footprints on the bathroom floor as you try to chase down a disappearing waistline and your vanishing patience. Let's get real for a minute. It's easy to be swept away by dazzling before and after stories, testimonials glowing brighter than a fresh spray tan. The lure of miracle is strong, but all that glitters isn't Wegovy. For every headline touting breakthroughs and weight loss wonders, there's a quieter footnote. Results may vary. Side effects may apply. Consult your doctor before showing off on Instagram. In reality, the path to a slimmer waistline can get decidedly bumpy. The first and most obvious curve in the road: side effects, the kind that don't make it onto billboards. Sure, some folks breeze through with little more than a mild headache or an occasional grumble in the gut. But for others, Ozempic and its cousins can bring out a collection of oddities from the fine print. There's the infamous Ozempic burp, a phenomenon worthy of its own Reddit thread. There are the midnight sweats, the metallic taste in your mouth, and the subtle, or not so subtle, nausea that turns formerly favorite foods into foes. Suddenly, a dinner invitation feels less like a treat and more like a dare. The stories pile up like so many empty salad bowls. One woman swears her sense of taste has taken a holiday, leaving her negotiating peace treaties with broccoli. Another says the scale dipped, sure, but so did her energy, like a phone left charging on airplane mode. A third confesses that the biggest shrinkage she noticed was in her social life. No one warns you that cocktail hour with friends becomes a game of what can I actually keep down? It's not all doom and gloom, but it is a reminder. Even the brightest stars can cast unexpected shadows. There are more complicated caveats lurking around the corner. What if you do everything right? The pounds melt away. And so does your motivation the moment the prescription runs out. Studies warn that discontinuing these drugs often leads the weight to sneak back in, suitcase in hand, as if it was never gone. No one loves a boomerang diet. The emotional rollercoaster that follows can leave you dizzy, tired, and a little skeptical of easy answers. Doctors, too, are quick to wave their clipboards with caution. These drugs weren't originally built for weight loss alone. They belong to a class used in diabetes care and come with caveats about long-term safety. Start low and go slow, one expert advises. And remember, this isn't a set it and forget it solution. There are still gaps in the long-term research, especially if you're already managing other health issues or juggling several medications. What about that most cursed caveat of all? Cost. The sticker shock can feel like a side effect all its own. Insurance may or may not play ball, and out-of-pocket expenses can rival a luxury vacation. For many, the financial toll ends up looming larger than any number on the scale. If this all sounds daunting, take a breath. Every transformative journey, be it weight, health, or something else, requires a healthy dose of skepticism, a pinch of patience, and the readiness to rewrite your story if needed. The takeaway? The promised land of effortless weight loss is beautiful in the brochures, but take your time reading the fine print. Know the risks, count the costs. Trust your gut, even if it's a little queasy, because the best stories are the ones in which you stay in charge, cautionary tales and all. There's a reason every snake oil salesman has a long line. We love a shortcut, hate the gym, and sometimes history repeats itself, just with fewer feathers and more hashtags. So why does the promise of a miracle cure hold such sway over us, even when deep down we know it's probably too good to be true? For one thing, humans are wired to look for patterns, even when none exist. You hear your neighbor talking about how their cousin's friend's arthritis disappeared after eating a spoonful of coconut oil every morning. Suddenly, coconut oil seems less like a breakfast ingredient and more like a beacon of hope. This is how anecdotes elbow out evidence. One compelling story can drown out 1,000 boring statistics. Flashing back to the 1800s, patent medicines promised everything from eternal youth to new hair growth. The bottles were mysterious, the labels vaguely scientific, and the claims were outsized. Maybe it's the allure of mystery. Or maybe it's just the desire to believe that we can take the express elevator to health. The specifics change. Horse liniment becomes HGH supplements. Leech therapy morphs into detox tea. But the tune stays remarkably similar. Psychologists call this the illusion of control. We like to think our choices, what we eat, what we rub on our skin, can tip the cosmic scales in our favor. And so, when a friend, a celebrity, or even just a stranger on TikTok says something worked for them, it feels like a secret we've stumbled onto. This is magnified by the modern megaphone of the internet, where viral before and after photos and breathless testimonials make even the most dubious claims look convincing. Algorithm-driven feeds reward us the more we click, like, and share, nudging us deeper into a curated buffet of miracle stories. It's not a global conspiracy. It's just the nature of social media to echo what we already wish were true. And that's only half the story. Another key factor: hope. When you're feeling sick, tired, or stuck, hope is a powerful drug all by itself. Hope is what leads millions to try new pills, diets, or devices, even when science hasn't quite caught up, or has already called foul. Combine that with the placebo effect, which is real and surprisingly robust, and it's no wonder people walk away feeling better, regardless of whether the miracle cure contained anything more than sugar. But there's a darker current as well. Everyone wants to feel smart, in control, a little ahead of the crowd. Questioning official wisdom feels daring, almost rebellious. This is how alternative health remedies often get positioned, not just as a product, but as an identity, a community, an inside track. The voice whispering that doctors are hiding the truth, that big pharma is afraid of a simple cure, taps into our deepest suspicions. It's tempting to think we alone have figured it out, especially when the promise is so easy to swallow. Of course, the urge for miracle cures isn't a failure of intelligence. It's more about emotion than logic, a blend of optimism, fear, and longing. When faced with uncertainty, we default to stories, seeking meaning where science only gives us probabilities. And, until there's a shortcut that actually works, the promise of a miracle will always have an eager audience. In the end, the psychology of miracle cures is just as much about hope as it is about hype. It's the ongoing story of human nature, told in bottles, blogs, and hashtags, proving once again that belief may be the oldest remedy of all. After all the miracles, the meltdowns, and the mysterious Victorian tinctures, maybe the solution is just a laugh, eat the occasional donut, and forgive yourself for being human in all its absurd glory. Because the truth is, humans have always longed for shortcuts. For as long as there have been mirrors and reflective puddles, there have been people hoping there's something simpler, something faster, than just living with ourselves. Medieval monks tried vinegar fasting and celery water. Colonial Americans wrestled their waistlines with recline and vinegar of antimony, which, for the record, we do not recommend. And through it all, from the powdered wigs of Georgian London to the neon headbands of the 1980s, the hope was the same, that this time, this thing, this secret, would finally unlock a better version of ourselves. We scroll, we click, we order wild-eyed teas and pocket-sized metronomes. We buy strange powders. One scoop in your coffee, melt the fat. Even as some part of us remembers our great-grandparents had their own version, with their own outlandish promises. It's easy to look back and laugh at the weight-loss tapeworm pill or the vibrating belt machine. But our own era is simply the latest installment in a centuries-old comedy. The platforms have changed, the hashtags update every week, but the underlying longing, an almost innocent hope in transformation, remains the same. There's a strange comfort here. History reminds us that no, you're not especially gullible or especially vain, but spectacularly, universally human. The folks smearing goose grease on their stomachs in the Gilded Age were simply wrestling the same bewilderment you are, staring at a TikTok green juice cleanse at midnight. Sure, maybe you aren't strapping yourself into a whalebone corset or boiling down miracle roots you bought from a bearded stranger at the town fair. But the impulse to find an anchor in the chaos, to do something instead of nothing, is timeless. So much of the charm and heartbreak in the history of fads is not in their failure, but in the audacity of their hope. People wanted to believe they could banish self-doubt, silence inner critics, and finally rest, however briefly, in the feeling of enough. The infomercials and penny pamphlets might change, but what they promise, a better, happier life, is evergreen. Tonight, instead of scolding yourself for your indulgences or feeling small about your stubborn imperfections, realize that your struggle is both ancient and global. The tools, herbal, mechanical, digital, chemical, are always shifting. But being swept up in a tide of trends is just part of the human condition. Maybe this is why the stories of bizarre diets and ingenious inventions make us laugh. They reveal how vulnerable and imaginative we are. How the search for meaning and the search for slimmer thighs sometimes travel the same road, and how most shortcuts, in the end, come back around to self-kindness, And if you must take a lesson from the endless parade of panaceas, let it be this. There is grace in forgiving ourselves, humor in our collective misadventures, and maybe, just maybe, solace in the knowledge that the next miracle fix is always just over the horizon. Maybe the wisest thing you can do is to embrace the absurdity, savor the occasional donut, and know that you're not alone in your messy quest for self-improvement. The world will keep peddling its potions and programs, but you can choose, tonight, to treat yourself kindly, laugh at your own gullibility, and trust that being a little bit lost is itself a very old, very shared tradition. So tonight, as you sink into your clean sheets with your midnight snack of choice tucked securely out of view, take a moment to salute the eternally optimistic, occasionally desperate, and endlessly creative people who came before you, chasing weight-loss dreams through herbs, leeches, corsets, pills, and now, the almighty Ozempic. Give yourself some credit for surviving a world that constantly promises shortcuts while secretly knowing there are none. Because history might be full of jars labelled miracle, but it's also full of people, just like you, making the best of it, laughing at their mistakes, and sometimes even loving themselves anyway. Sleep well, modern miracle seeker. Let tomorrow's diet trends take care of themselves. So tonight, as you sink into your clean sheets with your midnight snack of choice tucked securely out of view, take a moment to salute the eternally optimistic, occasionally desperate, and endlessly creative people who came before you, chasing weight-loss dreams through herbs, leeches, corsets, pills, and now, the almighty Ozempic. Give yourself some credit for surviving a world that constantly promises shortcuts while secretly knowing there are none. Because history might be full of jars labelled miracle, but it's also full of people, just like you, making the best of it, laughing at their mistakes, and sometimes even loving themselves anyway. Sleep well, modern miracle seeker. Let tomorrow's diet trends take care of themselves.